Hi everyone, my name is Alondra and I'm going to be going over my intercultural communication midterm project. I'm going to be going over the agenda really swiftly. So the first thing on the agenda is the research problem. I'll be going over why I chose it, the research question, operational definitions, research design, peer review journal, and reflections. So, what is my research problem? My research problem is how social justice affects students in a learning environment. So, typically, the research question begins with the research problem. It could be an issue that someone may like to know more about, maybe an area that could be changed or addressed. It usually determines the methodology. It kind of guides all the stages of inquiry, analysis, and reporting. So, why I chose my research problem? The reason I chose this was because I wanted to learn the effects and long term effects um, of learning or not learning about social justice in the educational environment. I also wanted to learn how social justice affects the way students uh, view the world and potentially how they learn, if it makes a difference. Would learning about social justice empower students and want to make a change at an earlier stage in life? My research question. So for a research question, it usually is the core or the focus of a research project. It helps determine the direction of the project, if there's an area of concern, and perhaps what could be improved in that area. A research question would be best for this study specifically because in this case, we are asking a question and we are wanting to receive some answers. In this study, we are wanting to determine how social justice affects students in a classroom, or how it can affect their education by learning or by being empowered by it. So my operational definitions. So the first one I have is social justice, and it's basically the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. Effect would be to have an effect on, make a difference, or influence on. Education, to teach, to learn, or give systematic instruction. And students would be any person engaged in study. So for my research design, I will be using the quantitative method. I find that the quantitative method is the best method to use for this specific study, only because it allows you to collect data in a numerical um, way, therefore being the most efficient, and surveys being one of those methods. The best way to collect data would be by conducting an anonymous survey with some questions, including what their race is, their ethnicity, the type of schools they attended, and if they felt that they had equal opportunities growing up or in an educational environment versus those who are more privileged and went to a better school. I would also have about 70 to 80% of adults in underrepresented communities or people of color to take the survey. And then the rest, I would have those who are a bit more privileged to take, just to kind of compare and see if they had the same reaction or emotion, or if they felt like this had the same amount of opportunities, etc. And then as for my peer review journal, I picked the journal titled The Trouble with Social Justice Education, Teacher Identity, Orthodontics, and Activism in Distress Times. And the journal is basically about a white man who's attending a conference. He's speaking to the audience, and the audience is all educators from all kinds of schools. And he's kind of explaining, how women's rights are still being ignored, Black Lives Matter, Black lives are still being lost. There's no gun control, and it's still an issue despite of the communities, um, and despite of all the protests, all the criminal convictions, reform and change. And he's standing there and is kind of addressing the audience and saying that, I am a white man and I know that I have all the privilege, so who am I to be speaking about activism? And the reason he's doing so is because he's speaking to a room full of educators and kind of, letting them know we are all privileged to be here. We are coming from universities. Our expenses have been paid for this trip. We have the privilege to be here. And, kind of starts in the classroom, like, as an educator, how can you help make these changes come alive, as in empowering their students and creating that curriculum to inspire and help their students thrive in a school. And at the end, he reaches out to the audience, to come in unity and help make these changes become reality. And as far as my reflections, for the first one, I have concept of research ethics. The concept of research ethics is the application of moral rules and professional codes of conduct, such as privacy, confidentiality, and informed consent. So, as for confidentiality, demands of the identity being researched to be kept private, except in a few cases where the research may be carried out. And as for high context cultures, a high context culture relies on implicit communication, nonverbal communication cues. So, in high context communication, a message cannot be understood without a great sense of background information. In this case, those who would be taking the survey would be a high context culture, just because they're underrepresented community. So someone of a European descent wouldn't really understand without context behind the survey questions. And that is it for my project. Thank you for listening.